of me! Ma'am, you're hurting my staff. Release her hand. I will not be talked to like this! Then listen. Right now you're crossing a line and I'm not letting you.
Whoa, you're making a mistake.
The only mistake would be not to—
Don't touch that vase. The warning snapped through the hall just as Alyssa felt Eleanor's grip tighten around her wrist. Guests turned. The chandelier lights blinked against the polished crystal Eleanor had nudged minutes earlier. Now blaming Alyssa for nearly destroying the professor froze mid-step. Realizing what he had witnessed wasn't a mistake but a setup. And in that suspended moment, it became clear. This wasn't just an accident. It was an attempt to break her. What happened next would expose the truth. Behind the millionaire's wife and the waitress she tried to humiliate. If this pulled you in, comment your city below. Before everything unraveled, before the whispers, the humiliation, and the downfall that would shake the wealthy elite of Crestmont. Heights Alyssa Johnson lived an ordinary life marked by silent strength. At 23, she had learned to carry herself through the world with the resilience her mother taught her. Shoulders steady, voice calm, and dignity untouched, no matter the storm. She worked 2 jobs to support her education, dreaming of saving enough money to continue her nursing program one day. For now, though, she was the newest waitress at Sterling Manor, an exclusive private dining club reserved for millionaires, politicians, and polished perfection. The job wasn't glamorous. It was demanding, exhausting, and sometimes demeaning. But it paid more than anything else she could get in the city. And Alyssa had learned long ago that survival meant taking opportunities even when they came wrapped in discomfort. Sterling Manor was a world of chandeliers, tailored suits, and people who pretended not to see her unless they needed something. Yet she kept her composure, consistently delivering her work with grace. She often crossed paths. The staff tucked into forgotten corners of the lavish estate, particularly Mrs. Duarte, the elderly Venezuelan janitor who scrubbed marble floors nearly twice her age, and the nighttime philosophy professor who held small seminars in the Manor's rented conference lounge. Both were kind, humble, and largely invisible to most members. Alyssa saw herself in them, ordinary people navigating extraordinary spaces. But her routine was about to shift. Every staff member spoke in hushed tones about one particular woman, Eleanor Rathmore, the millionaire's wife whose presence could freeze an entire room. People feared her temper, her sharp tongue, and the quiet power she held over the manor. No one crossed her. No one challenged her. And certainly no one embarrassed her. Alyssa didn't think much of those stories at first. But on her 4th week at the manor, she noticed the shift in unusual tension in the air. Glances exchanged between servers. The kind of nervous energy that hinted that something or someone was about to collide with her life in a way she could never have anticipated. The calm of her ordinary days was about to crack open. The first sign came during a private luncheon hosted by the Rathmores. A table of 10 affluent guests sat beneath a sparkling chandelier, discussing investments, philanthropy, and the world as if it revolved exclusively around them. Alyssa approached quietly, notebook in hand, doing everything by the book. But the moment Eleanor Rathmore lifted her gaze, the shift in her expression was unmistakably subtle narrowing of the eyes. A sharp intake of breath, a cold appraisal that lingered too long. Alyssa recognized that look. She had seen versions of it her whole life. Eleanor didn't speak to her directly, not yet. She simply whispered to a guest beside her who glanced up at Alyssa with the same expression. As if something about her presence was offensive, even threatening. Alyssa kept her head down and her movements measured. Her heart, however, tightened. Throughout the meal, Eleanor tested her. She sent her back for a different water temperature. She claimed the silverware was misaligned. She complained that Alyssa's presence was disruptive without specifying how. At first, Alyssa thought she was imagining the hostility, but the professor, who sat as an invited speaker that afternoon, noticed. His eyes followed the tension quietly, almost academically, as though he was witnessing a study in power imbalance. By the time Alyssa returned with dessert, Eleanor had made her first cutting remark. It wasn't loud, but loud enough. I suppose standards have been lowered, she said, glancing at Alyssa's dark skin. Her natural curls neatly tied back. Or perhaps they're just hiring anyone these days. A few guests chuckled politely. Alyssa felt her cheeks warm, but she remained steady. She had endured far worse. She wouldn't let this woman break her professionalism. But Eleanor wasn't done. During cleanup, she instructed Alyssa alone, not the other waitresses, to polish an entire row of crystal vases in the reception hall. They were perched precariously on a narrow marble ledge, well out of typical reach. The janitor, Mrs. Duarte, approached quietly while mopping. Her voice trembled as she warned Senorita, "She wants to make you fail." Others before. They were blamed for breaking things. Alyssa's stomach dropped. She understood the setup immediately. Still, refusing wasn't an option. Later that evening, the professor passed by the hall and paused, his brow furrowing. He seemed torn, wanting to intervene, but knowing the hierarchy of the manor wasn't something he could easily disrupt. Instead, he gave her a slight nod of solidarity and walked on. Minutes later, Eleanor appeared. She circled Alyssa slowly, examining her like an intruder rather than an employee. Then, with deliberate carelessness, she brushed past the ledge, knocking one of the crystal vases just enough to tilt it. Alyssa reacted instinctively, catching it before it hit the ground. But Eleanor gasped theatrically. "You nearly destroyed a priceless piece," she roared. "Unbelievable. This is why standards must be upheld." Other staff members froze. Their eyes widened not at Alyssa, but at Eleanor's audacity. Then came the moment that turned tension into a storm. A small crowd of manor members, including the professor, emerged from a meeting just in time to see Eleanor grip Alyssa's wrist knot painfully, but in a way meant to assert dominance, to show everyone who was in control. Alyssa didn't resist, but the room felt the shift, the injustice vibrating beneath the chandeliers. And that was when everything began to unravel. The professor stepped forward first. His voice echoed across the hall, steady but firm, as he instructed Eleanor to release the waitress immediately. His words carried the weight of someone who had spent years analyzing injustice, but this time it wasn't academic. It was personal. Eleanor turned sharply, stunned that anyone, let alone a guest, would dare confront her. "This girl nearly ruined my property," she snapped. But before the professor could reply, another voice broke through, the soft but steady voice of Mrs. Duarte. She had witnessed the entire scene. Her mop still in hand, the courage rising in her tired eyes. "She didn't touch it," she said. "You pushed it." "I saw with my own eyes." The hall fell silent. A janitor, a professor, a black waitress. 3 people Eleanor believed she could dismiss. She laughed sharply. "And who do you think they'll believe? Me or you people?" Those 2 words, "you people," hung in the air like poison. Alyssa felt the sting deep in her chest, a lifetime of similar phrases echoing behind it. But before she could respond, the professor pulled out his phone. He pressed a button. A video played the very moment Eleanor shoved the vase. He had recorded the hallway moments earlier for his seminar presentation on architectural symmetry, and accidentally captured everything. Gasps erupted. Members stepped back. Eleanor's face drained of color. The truth was undeniable. Her power, her untouchable reputation began cracking before everyone's eyes. And for the first time, Alyssa felt the balance shift. Dear audience, where are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments. The fallout was immediate. Sterling Manor prided itself on elegance, integrity, and an untarnished public image. A scandal involving racism and abuse of staff was the last thing it wanted. Within hours, Eleanor's membership was suspended pending investigation. Within days, her influence began to crumble. And for perhaps the first time, she faced consequences not even her wealth could shield her from. Alyssa didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She simply felt a quiet, deep breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Mrs. Duarte hugged her gently, relieved to see justice unfold. The professor offered her reassurance. He admired her composure and resilience. More importantly, Sterling Manor issued an apology to Alyssa and revised their staff protection policies. New cameras were installed. New protocols were drafted. All because one young woman refused to break under pressure. And two unlikely allies chose truth over silence. Alyssa continued working, but something in her shifted. The manor didn't intimidate her anymore. She stood taller, walked with confidence, and recognized that her existence in that place mattered not just for her survival, but for every person who had been overlooked, belittled, or dismissed. Her story wasn't just about a wealthy woman's downfall. It was about courage rising from quiet corners. It was about a janitor, a scholar, and a waitress who created a moment that forced a room full of influential people to confront their prejudices. And it left one question echoing. How many more stories like this must unfold before society learns to see the humanity in everyone? Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more powerful stories and new videos.